Well, today on Media and Society, we commemorate the release of Dr. Nelson Mandela from prison in 1990. Welcome to Media and Society. I'm your host, Naledi Moleo. This is the show where we look at the intersection between the media and society. This show, of course, is not complete without your input, so give us a call on 011-714-0661 or 0662, or tweet us using the hashtag SABC Media Society or the handle at SABC_MNS. You can also send us a voice note or video. We'd love to see your face via WhatsApp. That number is 011-714-6261. We're opening up many more means of communication because we're always keen to hear your views on how the media does its work. So this is what we're discussing today. On the 2nd of February in 1990, President F.W. de Klerk declared the unbanning of political parties in South Africa. And then on the 11th of February in 1990, Dr. Nelson Mandela was released from the Victor Verster prison after serving 27 years in prison. He addressed the nation and the world from the Grand Parade in Cape Town. Now, without the media, those iconic visuals and stirring words would not have been captured for the future generations to be able to see. But it also marked a pivotal moment for the trajectory of all the things South Africa, including the media space, and its ability to operate without fear on the ongoings of the country. A very important time that was. So as we mark this historic occasion, we gauge whether the hopes and dreams that this momentous occasion represented for so many in the country and around the world have been honored, and whether we have done enough to honor the legacy of Dr. Mandela. Joining us in studio today to discuss and reflect, we are joined by Mr. Sam Msibi, veteran SABC video journalist. We're joined by Mr. Sello Hatang, the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, as well as Sophie Mokoena. You know her very well, of course. She's the SABC editor for international news. We also have Mr. Siphiwe Ncinci, who is a print journalist from Romana Media in Kimberley, a young journalist who's going to tell us about what the storytelling around Dr. Mandela looks like now in the new era. So it's going to be a very, very, very busy discussion. But before we get started, our producer, Mosam Kalipi, took to the streets to hear your views about storytelling around Dr. Mandela.
Behind me is the Nelson Mandela Bridge in Johannesburg, of course a very significant name to today's topic, as February marks the month of the release of former statesman Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela from prison over 30 years ago. He had served, of course, 27 years in jail. This was a time where South Africans felt a renewed hope, where they felt like the country would be led towards the road of democracy and a road to freedom. We took to the streets of Johannesburg to find out whether they feel that the country has come forward or has rather improved since his release from prison, or have things remained the same. Let's have a look.
Yeah, when I say singacho sithi okuncinci khona kwenzekile but okuninzi okumoshekayo kuningi okumoshekayo since waphuma and kuwesi nowadays tshontsha imali asebenzi. I mean zonke into zakhona akhonto esihamba ngendlela. Sixakekile my sister kunzima nyani gogo.
No, it's not improved at all about everything nje ezenzekalo from to schools from nje there's a lot that needs to be done like to improve guys ziningi nje izinto ezenzakalayo like bheka njengamanje queue njoba si standing we're not sure ukuthi whether our applicants azothathwa or they will go to a waste, so we've been applying but there's no response to show ukuthi there's something eyenzakalayo.
I improve at all because mangathi uyabheka into ziba worse. Understand that the reason being kumanje bheka siselayini engakanani for imisebenzi. How many are we here? You understand, and the days before this day bangeke abantu abazela. You understand, because mangicabanga nini understand kwami since le line mani so you understand, so it's wrong. You understand, so mabazame something angazi bangazama in but babazame la South Africa kunini kumanje ugesi uyahamba non stop kumanje siza kanjani la sigeza nini sifothe kupha nini senza yonke lento nini.
Hayi nakancane next it hasn't improved in any way. Unemployment rate is very, very too high in South Africa. Very, very too high. So in South Africa, as we know, it's either if I was umuntu we keep him. Besides that, it's a problem. And now when a massive you give and still money. You understand? And then at the end of the day, Maufiga, you don't get employed.
There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa. Mrs. Winnie Mandela next to him, waving to the crowds. Hand in hand, they leave the Victor Verster prison. Officials, marshals of the National Reception Committee trying to get the people, and a salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela, his wife Winnie, greeting the people outside the fences of the Victor Verster prison. That is the man who the world has been waiting to see. His first public appearance in nearly 3 decades. 72 years old, walking strongly, step by step, further into freedom.
I think as a journalist watching those visuals, I must admit, I'm quite envious of that day to cover that momentous moment for South Africans. But with our guest today, we're able to really learn around what the atmosphere was like and how the media told that story back in 1990. So let's speak firstly to Mr. Sam Msipi, who joins us now via Zoom, about that particular moment, those visuals that you were running as a journalist. What did that feel like?
It was such a momentous moment whereby you will not know who you are. You just saw that tall man coming out of prison, and you saw that the whole country change on that day. It was amazing. It was a great moment to work around the big crowd to try and get the picture that will depict who Mandela is.
Mm. And that's the interesting part, right, is that the picture about who Mandela is, for many South Africans, it was the first time we'd actually seen his face, correct?
That's correct, and I think...
yes, indeed. It was like the last time you see the Mandela picture was when Zinzi brought it in Jabulani Amphitheatre and then says, "My father," and yes, he showed a picture of Mandela, and then the crowd went, wow, at that time. And then when you now see that old man coming out of jail with your own eyes, it was just something else.
Let's hear from Tate Hatang as well. We had never seen that picture. So that particular moment, I'm sure even in your archives, a lot of traffic around people wanting to go back to that magical moment.
I think that's the power of TV, the power of media, how it can actually transmit what you would have imagined for years, and suddenly it comes real. And I remember I was at home in Kokuma, where I was born, and just after that moment, we saw Madiba on TV, and he had addressed, it was in the evening, and one ran onto the streets, and we were jubilant. So that first image was also undoing what you always thought of Madiba. Who is this guy? Is he going to come out black hair? How is he going to look like? And suddenly there he was in front of you.
Let's bring our Sophie in here, because one of the things you've been able to do is tell stories throughout the different phases of South Africa. What did that story look like pre-1990? The story of Nelson Mandela, how was it told pre-1990?
Well, at that time, I was in the Vaal Triangle. I started at the SABC in 1994, July after the elections. In that year, I was at the IEC. But in 1990, I remember very well, I was home in Frankfurt in the Free State, even though I used to stay in Vaal because I was working in Vaal. But I decided to leave early, going back to the Vaal, so that when that announcement, when Mandela is going to address people outside, I will be in the Vaal, because in the Vaal I was a political activist, and therefore in the civic movement, and therefore I wanted to be with the people that I worked with in activism work. So immediately after that, we walk from Everton, it's very far, to Vereeniging in town. It was raining, and we didn't even feel that rain. Only when we had to go back to Everton, we realized, oh, what have we done? How far we've gone. And we had to walk back. But also, in terms of that picture, when I was at Jordan High School, Wilberforce, where Charlotte Maxeke was, the school that was started by Charlotte Maxeke and later became a secondary school. I was there. I wrote a poem, not knowing Mandela. It was in 87, so because we used to compete in terms of writing. It was at the height of the unrest, and therefore the only thing that we could do was to try and document at grade 12, which is standard 10 at that time. And I wrote a poem about an island that I never knew, that is Robben Island, trying to express what was inside me, that this island is taking our leaders. And I wrote that poem in Sesotho. And I wrote about Mandela, but I didn't know him. And on that day when I saw those visuals, for me it was just a wow, because the poem that I had written in Sesotho when I was at grade 12 with some of my colleagues or students or learners who were together in that class, I saw exactly what I wrote, the image that I created in my mind, a strong person, a powerful person, who really was able to be strong at a very difficult time. And therefore, on that day, we were very, very happy. And it was a day where one said, yeah, our country is now going in the right direction.
That's so poignant, the idea of a poem that was written about an island that's taking our leaders, but you were writing also about a man that you did not know. So does that mean that there was no storytelling, Babu Msibi, about Mandela before 1990? I mean, what did people know? What was the media telling about him?
Much told about Mandela before 1990 because of the restriction of the apartheid laws. But the resistance of UDF and other organizations were the ones that were really preaching for the release of Mandela. It was, I would say, if you would say Mandela, you could end up in John Foster Square because the police would not want to hear the word Mandela anywhere in the country at that time.
Wow. I'm keen to hear your thoughts, those of you that were around in 1990. What do you make of that day, also the coverage of it? What do you remember of that day? Give us a call on 011-714-0661 or 0662. Give us a call, of course, tweet us as well, hashtag SABC Media Society. We're talking about the coverage of Tatu Mandela from his release in prison, but also we're going to talk about his coverage of his life throughout the various phases of it as well. Talk to us about the archives that you have kept, because you do have this rich archive of Tata's life.
You know, one of the things that one appreciates about the power of archive is how it can deliver the past to being just here in front of you. So some of the stuff that we have go back, the first note that we have dates back to 1932, which is Madiba's church membership card.
Wow.
In the Methodist Church. In the Methodist Church. And I think if you look at the archive then, it was as if this man knew that he was going to be great, because he preserved stuff that you and I would throw away. He didn't throw away. He would call my colleague Vern Harris and just say to him, look, come and collect. I've got a carton of stuff. Come and collect it. Vern then goes to the office. It's a gem of archive, notes that he made as he was observing the CODESA process. And if you were to journey with Madiba through his notes, you can see the kind of dream that he had for the country, the constitutional being that he was. And I think if we are to begin to even just scratch a little bit in the archive, we'll appreciate the work of people like Ndate Msibi, how they would bring to the world. And us, the man who had just come out of prison, and in the archive it then just shows how his conflictedness while he was in prison, and as he was leaving, what he was leaving behind. I want to give you one quick example of how, speaking to Jack Swart, who is Madiba's last warder, he kept these sticky notes from Madiba.
Wow.
And it's storytelling that Mesophi does so well, that he said when Madiba left prison, he didn't say goodbye to him. All he did was just touch his shoulder and left.
Wow.
And I think that's the kind of man that we are talking about, forgiving, but also could memorialize. And I'm hoping that we memorialize him in a way that helps bring those dreams back that we have deferred for too long.
You know, I'm quite interested also in hearing the voices of the young journalists that are coming up right now and what that story of 1990 means to them, how they tell that story. And for that, we are joined by Mr. Siphiwe Ngqongqo, a print journalist from Romana Media in Kimberley. So, community media, speaking directly to people. Siphiwe, a good morning to you. How do you, as a young journalist who has direct access to communities, tell the story of 1990? Do you find it important?
Good morning, and good morning also to your viewers. What I would say, especially when it comes to those times, it is very inspirational when it comes to today's youth and as to where the country has come since then. As we know that the journalists in those times in apartheid era were forced even to be mandated to be part of those stories, meaning they couldn't even remain partial. And especially when it comes today, we are facing so many difficulties, which are economic issues, and there is not much that we can relate to, but we are appreciative as to where the country has come from since then. And as to that means that there is something that we needed to keep the legacy of Nelson Mandela, especially when it comes to today, and never take anything for granted.
Yeah, but Siphiwe, let's talk a little bit about what your audiences want, because the reason why we're speaking to you as a community print journalist is because you know directly what people want to read up on in our communities. Do South Africans care about the 1990 story?
If I may come to the spectrum, especially when it comes to local communities, which are where I'm at this moment, especially in this today's era, for me, from what I have cited, is nobody gives that much of an attention or cares that much when it comes to those times, because there's so many difficult issues which they are facing in current moment, in which when you come to speak with them as to, okay, guys, what can you take out of those times? And there's like, there's nothing much. It happened, and it's time to move on, basically.
Yeah, that's quite something to hear, isn't it? Siphiwe, Babu Msibi, what do you think about when you hear that? Because you go back to that moment when you were running with your camera, and it was one of the most important moments, certainly, of your life as a video journalist. And you hear a young journalist who has access to people on the ground who says, well, it really isn't that important of a moment anymore.
Well, it feels sad, but it feels very sad to hear that. Anyway, you know, from 1990 to now, they didn't make the Mandela name to live more. I would have loved that name of Mandela to be like the name that can survive centuries, so that people should know where they come from and where they are going. For me, I feel very sad that a young man will say the communities, they know nothing now about Mandela. I wish Mandela name should have been kept along for a very long time.
Yeah, let's take a short break. When we come back, though, we're going to talk a little bit about how the story of Tatu Mandela from 1990 up until today has been told, how it's shared, and how we keep that legacy that Tatu Msibi is talking about alive and at least in the forefront of South Africa's thoughts. Let's take a short break, though. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to Media and Society. So in the first segment, we took a look back into the state of the media and the country as we looked at the dawn of democracy. Now we're going to look at the present and really what questions are being raised on whether we have been worthy of the sacrifices afforded to us by so many, like Tatu Msibi. We're still joined by Tatu Mandela, rather. We're still joined by Sam Msibi, veteran SABC video journalist, Mr. Sello Hatang, who's the CEO of of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, or Sophie Mokoena, who's the SABC editor for international news, as well as a young journalist, Spiwe Ngqongqo, someone to watch out for, a print journalist from Rumana Media in Kimberley. We're taking your calls as well on 011-714-0661. We've got Annette on the line. Annette, good morning to you. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. My name's Anand Singh. I'm a filmmaker.
Oh, Anand Singh. Wow. Thank you so much for calling.
Yeah. No, it's great to see that you're doing this show and listening to South Africans about Mandela. The comments and fellow good morning to everybody. It's a fascinating the last 24 hours, and this journalist talk about the Mandela era being over. It's very interesting because we sit, people in the world, they look at the Greek philosophers, they look at Confucius, Socrates, Gibran, and and we learn from them. And here we are sitting.
Mr. Singh? Okay, we've lost him. Oh, goodness, I wish we were able to get you back on the line. Of course, Mr. Anand Singh is a legendary South African film producer who's calling into the show. And Sophie, let's bring you in here because we heard from Spiwe earlier saying, well, when you speak to people on the ground, it's not an important story. But we've got someone like Anand Singh who just called on to the show. Do you have a different experience of how...
I really have a different experience. It depends on how you tell a story. A journalist is a storyteller. You document history, you tell a story. And therefore, when you tell that story, it must really reach the people and it must draw attention to what you are saying. I've done lots of stories where I track stories that are historic, it be the ANC and its history, its conferences, and now recently when I did a 45-minute piece on Parliament since 1994 when they walk in there until the last sitting of Parliament, not this year. When you look at that clip on YouTube right now, you know that people don't like these long clips. They don't watch.
Yeah, the attention
span. If you
get
1,000 hits, you are very lucky. If a clip is more than 10 minutes. That one is 45 minutes. Yesterday when I checked, it had 15,000 hits.
Sure.
It's a long, but it is how I told that story, using the rich archives of the South African Broadcasting Corporation and the pictures and the sound of newsmakers telling the story. That's why people continue to watch and watch and watch. And I have no doubt before end of the year, I'll be at 100,000. So it is how you tell your story, how you write, what kind of visuals you use, what kind of sound you use. And therefore people will be interested. And I think, yes, on Friday when I was going through the Madiba archives, because I wanted some natural sound where he is with journalists, greeting journalists. When I looked at what I covered as a journalist post his presidency. The colleagues in line record, where I was ingesting the material from archives, were actually laughing. And how also for this? How also for this? And it's young people majority in archives. And also the same with the colleagues who are working at Land Record. And therefore it depends how you tell that story. And I think it's not true that the young people are ignorant. They have no interest in what happened. Yes, they do have challenges. They want those challenges to be addressed by the current leadership, but they are interested in knowing how did we arrive at this point and where we at and how we can improve. And that is why you still have learners at school who like history. You have students at varsities who are really keen in doing humanities and history in particular and political science.
Yeah.
And therefore, you must be creative in storytelling.
I'll admit that I was one of those students that loved history and loved the stories of where we come from. So we still have Mr. Anand Singh on the line. Thank you so much for calling in. It's such a pleasure. I think as a filmmaker, talk to us a little bit about how film played a role as well in telling the story of Madiba in South Africa. I think a lot of us think back to the image of a Sarafina who's got, who speaks to Madiba almost as if she's praying in that movie, and how that in and of itself was the way that South Africa thought of Madiba.
Absolutely. It really is very interesting because when you mention Sarafina, and Cello can tell you about screening, Cello can tell you about the screening we did in New York with Sarafina, and it's 30 years since we released the film, and it was very much inspired by Madiba, and the relevance of the film today and Madiba's legacy to young women, to the people 30 years ago is more significant today as we fight the challenges that every young person has, as we look for hope. And, we're going to re-release the film, and it's a celebration of that hope. And I think coming back to the Mandela story, so Sarafina is one example of how you tell the Mandela legacy, and then you have the archives of amazing work that Cello has done, and as your other the lady commented that it's very much about storytelling, and the youth and the journalists that called in are very impatient. But that being said, we must learn from whatever we can, and whether it's the Mandela legacy, Tambo's legacy, the parliamentary legacy of the film that you just made, those are the things that will be in 100 years' time be watched and observed. But this year is actually a very historic year. It's the 10th anniversary of Madiba's passing. I mean, here we are looking at 33 years ago yesterday that he was released, and it's 10 years have flown by, and he would have been 105 this year. So, we have this rich culture and legacy that Madiba, Kathrada, Sisulu, everybody left us, and we shouldn't ignore it. We have to take it seriously. And that was what we were so inspired by, to free our country and our people. And Cello sent me this morning a very good WhatsApp message, which I think he should read on television or talk about, because it was very much about what we expected 33 years ago, where we sit and where we go. So, but thank you for bringing this up to the fore and having discussion on it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling in as well. That's Mr. Anand Singh, a South African legendary filmmaker as well. Let's talk a little bit, let's go back to how South Africans engage with the story of Mandela. We heard from Spiwe saying, no, we're happy to celebrate the man and the story of Mandela. But the reality is, when you go to the ground, if you look at young people, particularly in this country, a lot of them saying, no, there's nothing there. They almost talk about a betrayal when they talk about Utatu Mandela. How do you interact with that discussion?
I think it's important that we go back to what Sophie said, because she's saying the presentation of the story is important, how you present it. You'd remember the period where young people were calling Madiba all kinds of names. And I had the opportunity through the Nelson Mandela Foundation of bringing in some of them to the archive. And I'll take 2 hours maybe listening, because most of the young people want to be listened to. We don't create a space for them to be listened to. So for about 2 hours, I let them just pour it out. This is why we think the betrayal, I like how you use that word, the betrayal of the dream happened, and our dreams are being deferred daily. And Madiba is part of that deference of our dreams. And I'll take them through that, and then I'll take them to the vault where you have Madiba's archive. And I'd say, you said Madiba sold us out when it comes to education. Let's hear him from the grave. how he thought about it. And I'd open the archive and say, this is what Madiba thought about education on land. That by 1999, Madiba was hoping that 30% of the land would be restored back to black owners, the legitimate owners. That was never achieved. And even by the time he left office, he regretted the fact that he didn't achieve that. So I'd show them that every part of our legacy, Madiba was pained by. Healthcare. That's why when he retired as president, the first thing he did with people like Mesofi, he would go to communities where he would take a CEO of a company and then just bring in a healthcare facility. And I think if we were to care as much about our society, we would still have AKA alive. And I think if we are to do anything, I want to say to Len, AKA's mother and his dad, to say that we feel your pain. We pass our deepest condolences. No child needs to die like that. And that you then see them die through videos that are then conveyed. Yeah. And in the case of Madiba, you'd remember while he was in prison, he lost his mother and he couldn't bury her. And in a letter he wrote to the prison authorities, he said it's common cause that a child should always bury their parents. And when he lost his son, he said again in this case, I have to bury my son, but actually it needs to be the other way around. So to Lynn, I'm saying, I feel your pain because no parent should bury their child. And it's that dream of being crime-free that we thought 1990 and 1994 will declare apartheid as the crime, the criminal that we have. Today we have them roaming everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why the dream is deferred.
You know, it's interesting that you go back to AKA because I think my particular generation is still heart sore. We are in so much pain over the loss of AKA. And I have to bring this in because one of his songs, Fela in Versace, there's a line in there where he says, Mandela in a Rari. He thinks, you know, he paints this image of Utatu Mandela as this, you know, beautiful, glorious man in a Ferrari. He did his part as well in telling the story of Utata that I'm talking about, AKA. Speaking of musicians as well that have told the story of Utata, we're taking calls, 011-714-0661. Guess who's called in? Dr. Hot Sticks Mabuse has called in. Dr. Hot Sticks, a good morning to you. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, sir. And hello, Sophie, and all the viewers. I'm quite interested in the story that you're telling today. I think storytelling is very important. And I'm just saddened by Tiwa's response and reaction as well, which is quite understandable. However, one of the points that I wanted to make is that it's how we were socialized and made to understand the role that Madiba played by our parents. Now, we as parents have not played the role in teaching our children about the role that Madiba played. I think it must be a linear process, not only on TV or through media, but even within our families as well, because it's a very important story to continuously tell. You know, in the past, we know about Shaka. There was no television, but we understood what Mshweshwe did continuously because these were stories that were told by people within our family. So it's understandable that Tipiwa responds the way he does. I think perhaps his parents had not actually told the story the way they should have told the story, and that is my point.
All right, thank you so much for calling Dade Sipho Hot Sticks Mabuse. We're taking more calls, 011-714-0661. I'm keen to hear your thoughts about how the media covers the story of Utatu Mandela and what impact that has on the way that South Africa sees itself. We take a short break. We're back in a moment.
South Africa, since the democracy has changed, but it underlies still under the apartheid regime, and we don't realize it, but we're still living under the politics of apartheid. So definitely it hasn't changed for the best. It hasn't changed. It's basically going for the worst in South Africa, and there's a lot that still needs to be done.
No, I don't think it has not improved. because of sinamanje yabona ama-line lana wahambi yabona nezinto ezinjalo silibe simile nje sifuna umsebenzi nje sizama ngapha nangapha.
I feel like we're still living under the shadows of the apartheid system and nothing has changed. It has changed for the worse.
No, it's not. Because ezinye izinto kuri ntho tse ding tse ngata kore like for haholo re ke tjho kore like ntho tse tsa bo criminal issue hane so kore ntho tsa mosebetsi haholo re buela tsona tsa mosebetsi re suffer haholo because ka baka la the people who are from outside magoa anka advantage. You understand? Because those people have a kgetho gona ke bona or ha ba employee ha ba thotse mosebetsi or na ke ba ka thola even 20 rand. So when even in South African you have a qualification, these people are not qualification, so ba gonna accept anything.
Welcome back. So as we mark 33 years since the release of Madiba, we reflect on the strides that this country has made since freedom. And we also talk about the role that the media has played. We're still joined by Sam Msibi, veteran SABC video journalist, Mr. Sello Hatang, CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and Sophie Mokoena, who is SABC editor for international news, as well as Spiwe Ngqongqo, a print journalist from Romana Media in Kimberley. Spiwe, let me come back to you, because we haven't heard your voice in quite a while, and you've raised some interesting points about what South Africans on the ground actually feel about the story of Utatu Mandela. I want to talk a little bit about towards the end of his life, right? How you view the way that South Africans see the end of Tata's life, even the end of his presidency, but particularly also as we go back 10 years ago, what you go back to when you think about 10 years ago when Tata passed away. I mean, for a media practitioner, that was a big, big day.
Indeed, if I may say so, because during that time when he passed on, everyone, it was a standstill, especially to my community when you heard all those news. And yeah, because it was a great loss, and the way people were like, okay, we have lost the great legend who have right in the forefront in regarding of the life, but the way he played, the role that he played in the society out of there. And also, his stories needed to be told, if I may be honest, and in a continuous, but it needed to be in such a way whereby it is relative to the today's generation, because now we are going to the third decade in which the generation is going to have a different mindset to the previous generation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work then that needs to be done with the newer generations, right? And also for you, we're talking a little bit during the break about where that story needs to go, where we talk about telling the story of what Madiba did even towards the last few, decades of his life.
Dr. Sello spoke about those times when I had to accompany Madiba to different provinces. There, Madiba was opening schools. After 1999, post his presidency, he didn't relax and enjoy the pension. He continued to bring together business and all stakeholders to build schools, not with government funds, but private sector played a very prominent role in building schools, clinics, and other important structures that were needed at that time. And therefore, every time when he was going to open a school, it was not even maybe once after 6 months. Every month, I would get a call from Zelda Legrand that Madiba wants you at Waterkloof Air Force Base at 5 o'clock in the morning. You are going to Free State. You are going to open a school. And I would wake up, go there tired and be at the back of that Falcon 500, sleep there. Mandela want to talk to me. And I'm like, no, Tata, now I'm resting because I'm going to work. And when we arrive there, it's opening of schools. Go to Eastern Cape, KZN, Mpumalanga, and clinics. So he did a lot post-1999 after his presidency, more than when he was in the presidency, because during the presidency, he was almost like a person who was just preaching and ensuring reconciliation. But in terms of delivery, he did a lot post-1999.
Yeah.
The other important issue, he played a very critical role in ensuring that we do host the World Cup in 2010. You know, I remember when we went to Geneva, you know, for the final presentation of the bid. I traveled with with SAFA delegation, and he had his own plane because Tokyo and them had organized a chartered flight for him. And when he was there, he called me when he arrived. He said to me, I'm very confident we get in this one. What do you think? What must we do?
Wow.
So that was the kind of a person he was. And when we got that bid, I couldn't enter the venue where the announcement was made. I was outside at the door. And when he left, when I asked him how he feels at that moment, he gave us that profound soundbite. No one has it. SABC has got it. Now I can see my grave. But he didn't live long to see the World Cup in South Africa. And therefore, yeah, there's a lot that you can relate. I mean, the issue of today we talk about the invasion of Iraq, invasion of Libya and all of that. And the young people are engaging about the role played by international community in invading these countries. Maybe Ntatesolo can relate that story. Madiba was, you know, very firm on such incidents. Well, he's relevant.
Yeah, I want to do this though, and I have to say this, as a young journalist, I'm so envious of the stories that you're telling us right now. But let's bring in Babu Msibi, because he's been listening into this discussion, and I think as someone who was there in 1990, in the scramble of covering the release of Utatu Mandela, then we go back to 2013 in December, when we then learned of Madiba's passing. The coverage of that, as someone who saw the release and then his passing. Take us back to 2013, what that coverage felt like for you, because you had seen such a wide spectrum of his life leading the country, and also as a storyteller needing to tell it throughout that time.
Well, in 2013, when he passed on, it was so sad because of the great things that he has done in the country. And I will go back a little bit when his last time in Parliament, when he was last day in Parliament. I did a documentary on him as well, which is called Mandela Privately. So they were talking there with Tatu Mbeki, and Tatu Mbeki says, your shoes, Mandela says, who's going to fit my shoes? And Tatu Mbeki says, who can fit your shoes because they are so ugly? He was a man with so many things that I don't know how to describe him. I'm trying to put this together. Like, he will remember every journalist that he has met.
Wow.
He will call journalists by names, and the memory was very, very high. It's like he will know, this is Semu Msibi, this is Sophie, this is so-and-so. He will know the names of everyone. I really pay a lot of tribute to him for his governance as well. Even if things went wrong after him, I'm not saying how wrong they went, but they didn't go smoothly the way they're supposed to be, because I had very high hope for this country.
Yeah, let's take some calls. 011-714-0661. We've got Maredi in Limpopo. Maredi, good morning to you. Thank you so much for calling. Maredi, can speak up. Abuti Dumela, welcome to the show.
Dumela mama le kae?
Re teng le kae?
Rona ke tona ke mo Limpopo.
Antat.
Na go Mandela I just 1990. Sorry. 1990 ke pasene 1990. And I ke le mo tseleng ke ya busa. Then ka kor Mandela when she ke Commemorating ka mo kolong ra re ka mo tsoko. Ka re ke thoma go lla. Illa too much. And I Nelson Mandela go Alexander Stadium. I was very much happy, and now I'm 53 years now. I really, really enjoyed myself. Yes.
Wow. Maredi, thank you so much for calling in. There it is, right? The South African saying, I cried on that day. I stopped the car. and I cried because Tata was being released. And I think that's something we take for granted, that South Africans do emote quite deeply when they think about Tata, and we need to, how do we keep that going in our storytelling and reflect the fact that this is how South Africans feel about Tata?
No, I think if we were to again reflect on, you were taking us to 2013, and I think if we are to reflect on 2013 and ask ourselves, how do we reminisce about Madiba 10 years on? We miss him. We love him dearly. We continue to love him. But that reminiscing should be about what does the next 10 years look like. And in painting that picture, it should surely be about the country that he landed in when he came out in 1990, the country he tried to build between 1994 to 1999, and then the country that Mesofi just painted of 1999 until about 2007. And I think if we are to do that, you'll see that one thread that connects all of them is that he was hopeful, not just in words, but in action. That he was an action man. He was a uniter of people behind an ideal. That he would say, no, let's unite on this ideal of making journalists more accountable, making business accountable, making business also want to inject and invest in society. And if we are to do that, it means that we need to be creating a common vision as a nation. And today, I must tell you, 2013 should be a time when we're saying, we had a common vision as a nation. Where is that vision? What is our common vision today? What kind of society are we trying to build? And if we are to think like that, it means that we don't just rely on politicians.
Right.
We don't just rely on journalists.
Yeah.
Each one of us then can lead from wherever you are.
Yeah, well, let's go back to what South Africans are saying on the ground. Of course, our producer, Mosam Kalipi, having gone into the streets and spoken to South Africans about what they think around the story of Madiba and how it's told.
It has changed because back then we were actually divided. We couldn't go to schools with white people. We couldn't go shopping in certain places with white people. Right now, we are able to have that freedom of movement whereby you can actually go anywhere without being cross-questioned or even being taken by the police or anything like that. I think life is different, definitely, compared from when our parents were, and to now. For schools, we have opportunities to go to varsity now, and we have opportunities to work anywhere we want because of democracy.
I think only for a few. Bantabaning, I think it's gotten worse for the past 5 years. It's only for a few, not all of us. So yeah, it's become way worse than before.
What do you think can be done to be better?
Change the government, change the ruling party, give other people a chance.
I think it has changed. Yes, we thank God that our parents don't have to live under oppression and all of that. But if some of the laws were to be brought back, South Africa could be a better place.
I think it has, personally, for the better, mostly because, there are a lot of things that have changed in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of just processes around our country, our government, even though there is still work in progress and there's still room for more developments and more change, but I personally think that there is a lot that has changed.
I don't think South Africa has really changed much since democracy. I think we are following in the same direction as what happened in Zim. Things are not improving, things are going down the drain. There's a lot of issues, there's no work, employment is not there, and just freedom of speech at times I think is not there.
I believe so. For me, I think, actually, even me, I think is going down badly. Since also like you said, employees is a problem. We're going down badly, I think.
As we mark the release from prison of former statesman Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, we took to the streets of Johannesburg where we asked a number of people if they feel that the country has changed in any way since his release. Many conflicting views from people in the country, especially young people. One of the constant things that they said was the lack of employment in the country and also the high crime rates. One interesting point, however, was from a young lady who said that they felt that if the rules of apartheid still applied today, the country would be a much better place. But also we got some positive reviews as well, where some people said that they feel that, you know, there's a freedom of speech, there's freedom of movement, and people are able to go to school wherever they want. People are able to work wherever they want. So pretty much many different conflicting views from the people of Johannesburg. But for now, we go back to you in studio, and for SABC News, I am Musam Khalipi.
Interesting views coming from South Africans about the legacy of Utata, what South Africa looks like post-1990. Sophie, let's wrap it up. I think you've got Siphiwe Ngongo who's listening, he's still starting up his career, has direct reach to his community in Kimberley. Your call to action for someone like him so that we get that story told.
Siphiwe can be a best storyteller of Madiba and the role Madiba played. My humble appeal is that Ntate Sello Hatang invite him to the foundation, take him through the archives so that he can be able to be empowered like we were empowered. And therefore he'll be able to tell that story to his peers. And I think he is a good journalist, and young people will have a better understanding when the story is being told by their own peers. Yes. And also to the leaders of South Africa, this disgruntlement and people who have lost hope, it's because of leadership. I would make a humble appeal. All the leaders of South Africa currently, irrespective of color, creed, and political inclination, visit Madiba Archive and go and reflect.
It sounds like a call to action for you as well, but share yours with us, please.
It is indeed, and in fact, in the next couple of weeks, we will be launching our 10th program, 10-year program, looking at the 10th anniversary and 105th anniversary of Madiba's birth. And we will be working with the UN, our own government, civil society, and also business. And of course, media is central to that. Yeah. And I think I want to appeal, I know you want to close, I want to appeal to all of us to say that reminiscing about the past is for its sake, it's not enough. We must be working on those dreams that have been deferred. How do we ensure that we reinstill that sense of hope and pride in being who we are?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for speaking to us, Ntate Sello Hatang, the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, our SABC News international editor, Sophie Mekena, legendary video journalist, Mr. Sam Msibi, as well as Roman Na reporter, print media, young reporter, Siphiwe Ngongo, speaking to us from Kimberley. Thank you so much for watching Media and Society, and we hope that you will join us again, same time, same place next week. For myself and the rest of the team, have a beautiful Sunday.